Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. I'm your host Ali Imran at the premise of development economics, and today I have a guest who is not only spearheading development economics from the year 2019, but he is one of the protagonists of development studies, having a foreign doctoral degree in development studies in this part of region, Mr. Dr. Kashif Saeed.
Thank you, Ali bhai.
Dr. Kashif, as you know, in this podcast of development talk, we talk a lot about economic issues confronting the general public or the in general, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in particular. One aspect of our today program, which is something very important for the viewers to understand, is the repatriation and the return of Afghan refugee which were residing in Pakistan with almost 4 to 5 decades. And now Pakistan, with the active collaboration of United Nations High Commission for Refugees, has started repatriating them and announced anybody who doesn't possess a legal visa would ultimately have to return to his homeland, that is Afghanistan or Emirat, headed by Emirat Islami. My very first question, which will be the premise of today's talk, is that how you see the return of refugees to their homeland, to their country, and what are the political and economic factors behind it. Would you elaborate us for our viewers to understand? Ji, Dr. Kashif.
Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Thank you very much, Ali Imran bhai, for providing me the opportunity to participate in this talk. And as you rightly said, I am responsible for the development studies program for the last few years, and since 2019 we initiated a BS in development studies at the Department of Economics, University of Peshawar. And Alhamdulillah, this year we've also initiated the Masters and the PhD program in development studies at the University of Peshawar, and we have had a very healthy batch. We have got an intake of around 36 students in the graduate program only. So, day by day it's improving, and inshallah we together with colleagues like yourself, we are trying our level best to improve the quality of academics and research with a particular focus on development studies, development economics, and economics in general.
Yes.
So the question and the topic of today's program is a very interesting one. It affects, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as you are aware, it's a borderland economy. It has a lot of linkages with neighboring Afghanistan, and that has been the case historically. As far as the Afghan refugees are concerned, they've been here since the early 1980s, and they've been here for almost around 4 to 4.5 decades. A number of them, they've also been born over here, and at the height of the Afghan refugees, there were around 4 to 5 million Afghan refugees who were hosted in Pakistan, and some figures are even more. Some say that it was more than 5 to 6 million refugees. At the moment, the government is, it has made preparations and it's undertaking the returns process of the Afghan refugees. So first of all, the refugees in general, they are covered by the UN Refugee Convention, which is the UN Refugee Convention of 1951. And it provides, the rights, responsibilities, and entitlements to the refugees. Now, Pakistan is not a signatory to that convention. That is the first thing. But Pakistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they've hosted these refugees during the last 4.5 decades. They've provided them lands, houses, they've allowed them to participate within the economy, and they've been part of the economy. Now, the big question is, when 4 to 5 million people, they will be moving back, so it will have repercussions for Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's economy as well, for the local economy and Pakistan's economy as well. But looking at the scenario, looking at the political situation, which is happening in the region, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in South Asia, looking at the security dynamics, and also looking at, the American withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2022. So, I think the government decided, the federal government and the other authorities, they decided that this was the right time to,
To say farewell to them.
say farewell to the Afghan refugees. Now, there are different arguments, in favor and against that, but it is ultimately it is up to the government to decide. And the federal government has taken a decision, and the returns process is going on. And there is also a semblance of peace and stability in Afghanistan, somewhat, after the Taliban's return. Now, some might say that it's not positive peace. The conditions in Afghanistan, they're still, you can
Having
categorize
negative peace, yes.
you can categorize them as negative peace because there is a lot of structural violence within the Afghan society. The Afghans, the Taliban are, they've stopped females from participating in education. They've stopped them, from higher education. They've also stopped them from going out and, participating in jobs. So it's not entirely a very conducive society, but looking at the pros and cons, the government has decided and the process is ongoing. But Afghans and the refugees now, they are given the same status as of any other national. If they have a visa, so they can stay, otherwise, they are supposed to leave.
Okay, just to elaborate this point, how you would see the short-term and the long-term impact on our borderland, because you categorize the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the northwestern province of Pakistan, as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as a borderland. War economies, there is almost 1700 fence. The borderlands have been merged into the civilian areas. But even then, the Afghans, refugees were participating in Pakistan economy. That was more dominantly speaking into the ambit of informal economy. But now when they are going, what would be the aftershocks? Short-term impacts and long-term impacts.
Well, if you see, if you look at, of course, KP, like we, mentioned at the start, it's a borderland economy.
Yes.
But, since last year, I think since last year, September or October, I think there is the Afghan transit trade and other trade with Afghanistan has stopped. The borders, whether it's, Torkham, whether it's Chaman, they are sealed, for Afghan trade. So it's extremely unfortunate. In general, it is unfortunate because historically, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the tribal districts, and Balochistan, they're an integral part of the Afghan economy, the Afghan border economy, and the Afghan border economy has been an integral part of these areas. And, people have benefited, whether it's the tribes who live on this side of the border or that side of the border. So in general, it is not conducive to the local economy, but there are security considerations, as you are well aware of that, and there are other political considerations. So the politics and the security has influenced the economic aspect, which is not good in general. But then the other point which you mentioned, the short-term and the long-term impacts. The short-term impacts are, of course, it has to do with labor. Afghans, they were providing cheap labor, they were providing specialization in different sectors of the economy, particularly the entrepreneurial aspect. They were also good workers. So that is something which, the economy will have to reconfigure, will have to reconfigure in the short term and in the long run. But looking at things, looking at the rate of joblessness, looking at inflation, looking at demand pull inflation, looking at cost push inflation, I think even if Afghans were to leave, the locals, they will start to plug those sectors.
So as we were discussing the impact of transit trade, because it was somehow allowing the Afghan traders to bring in goods and from all over the world without any taxation, and all these goods were then smuggled into Pakistan. This was the one impact on Pakistan economy, And then when we see this informal economy, which has a boom as well through, because there was no fence. After 2020, there was a fence. How you juxtapose these two impacts on the Pakistani economy?
Thank you for asking again, Ali Bhai. The question with the informal economy, with the shadow economy in particular, is with the shadow economy and also with the illicit economy, was that the shadow economy was there because the Afghan transit trade agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan, it offered a lot of preferential access to. It offered preferential access to Afghanistan via the port of Karachi. And a number of those goods, it's well documented that they used to come back and they used to be sold inside Pakistan, and because of that, the exchequer, it incurred a lot of significant losses. So that's why the ATA agreement, the federal government, it revoked that agreement. Now, in addition to that, the other point, that of the illicit economy, that was even more detrimental towards the citizens and particularly towards youth, because like you're well aware of, a number of them, they've been intoxicated, whether it was, different narcotics or their associated substances, they were again, traded, and they were brought to mainstream Pakistan, and, the tribal areas, they were used as an instrument for their transport. So, those were the reasons, why the federal government, it revoked that facility to Afghanistan. But at the same time, looking at the reliance of, the local communities within the tribal areas, within the borderland areas, and within the borderland areas inside Afghanistan and Pakistan, we expect that cross-border trade, it should resume, because, it's in our best interest, and it's in Afghanistan's and the Afghanistan's people's interest that these trade and activities, they resume, because they are a crucial part of the local economy.
So, you broadly explained the impact of transit trade, vis-a-vis this informal economy, shadow economy, which you elaborated well. When we talk about refugees, they not only earn good spaces, economic opportunities, but they were somehow equipped with very good skills. Now they are leaving Pakistan. They will be very much beneficial to the Afghan informal or somewhat formal economy. What are the implications to the Pakistani economy you see or foresee?
Well, in the short run, there will be implications, because the Afghanis, they are good workers, they are skilled workers, and in areas where they were working, as skilled workers, for example, in handicrafts and carpet weaving, and in other areas as well, they were very good workers. So it would be a loss to the economy, and then also they were also, working as cheap labor. But at the same time, there are lots of local people who are unemployed. And there are youth who are unemployed. So I think the local economy has the potential to plug in for those lost labor, those labor who will be lost because of these restrictions. So in the short run, there will be challenges, but in the long run, it should stabilize. The local economy should stabilize. And at the same time, it's important that these people, they go back to Afghanistan, and, that peace and stability, it returns in Afghanistan, and that they play a vital role, in reviving the local Afghan economy. Because ultimately, because of insecurity in Afghanistan, it trickles back to Pakistan, and it has implications across the border. So, we would like to see them return, as responsible citizens in Afghanistan, and also as citizens who have lots of opportunities. And because Afghanistan is also now, it's again undergoing a process of state building, in the aftermath of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. But at the same time, we would hope that, in Afghanistan also, rights are accorded to all citizens, whether they are females, whether they are males, that they have the right to access to education, that they have the right to employment. And that are, areas of weaknesses, and there are some areas which the international community is also talking to them. So let's see. Let's hope that good sense prevails.
You talk about good sense. Even Washington is reconsidering not to allow almost close to 90,000 Afghans who are being permitted to have a special, visa to European Union or even America especially. When we talk about this in international politics today, since you are a expert of development studies, how you foresee this impact if this 90,000 people were not granted asylum into American society? They come back to Afghanistan, one. And then international donor agencies or countries somewhat see Afghanistan through the lens of counter-terrorism, trade and migration. How you again see these two very important aspects for Afghan society in considering that Pakistan is also repatriating Afghan refugees?
Yeah, it's a very valid point. It's an extremely important point. Of course, Pakistan is, repatriating millions of Afghans, and, the United States is bent on sending back 90,000. And of course, the US was a vital partner in Afghanistan, and it promised a lot, after the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 that, they will stabilize Afghanistan. But that is, the problem is, particularly since President Trump's, since he has rejoined as the American president, Trump's policies, they are, in most cases, they are not overlapping with the international architecture, development and international architecture, which has been in place since the 1945 and since basically the end of the Second World War. He is going against that, and in that sense, I would like to mention one point that he has also decreased the amount of funding available for international development, and that has affected countries like Afghanistan, that has affected countries in Africa, that has affected other developing and least developed countries, and it has affected health programs, it has affected stabilization programs, and same is the case with Afghanistan. If he's bent on sending back these asylum seekers, he should also support them through international development programs and INGOs and the UN system, because the USAID alone, it had a budget of around $44 billion, and he has cut that totally. So it is affecting these conflict affected countries, and these people from Afghanistan and other parts of LDCs, least developed countries, they will take difficult routes, and they will go to Europe, they will go to the US, whether it's through Mexico, whether it's through the ocean, and it does not help bring about peace, security and development. And one last point I would like to refer to is that if the US or other Western countries, if they provide funding for international development, that is not something which they are doing. They're not, they're only spending around $300 billion, $200 to $300 billion on global development, on international development. As opposed to that, the top 10 multinational corporations in the world, they have a turnover of $3,300 billion. Corporations, MNCs such as Pepsi, such as Shell, such as other global firms, they make 11 times more business. And most of that business is generated from these LDCs. So it's not they're simply doing this out of humanity. This is their responsibility. This is their responsibility as human beings. They are not only giving alms. 300 billion is just peanuts when you compare it with $3.3 trillion, which the top 10 MNCs, they generate as revenue annually. So that is something which they should consider, and there are lots of misconceptions regarding international development.
Dr. Kashif, how you foresee these Afghans, if they go back and they still think that Pakistan is a viable economy for them and they want to return to Pakistan, but still a lot of people feel that there is no relaxation in visa giving to Afghans for Pakistan. Do you think in near future any such sort of relaxation in visa regime should be developed between Pakistan and Afghanistan, so that the developed labor could come onto Pakistan and earn and send their remittance to Afghanistan, to develop Afghanistan?
It's a good question, a very good question, Ali Bhai. If you look at the European Union Common Area, there are 26 or 29 nations, and labor, capital, people, they can move across borders, and then Swedes, they can go to Norway, they can earn. Norwegians, they can go somewhere else. Danes, they can come to Norway. So there is a lot of mobility of capital, mobility, economic mobility, mobility of labor, and they have the right and the opportunities to work anywhere across the European Union. So same should be the case, with Afghanistan and Pakistan as well in the long term. Once these issues are resolved, we would like to see that, both for Afghans, for ourselves as well, vice versa, and if it could be extended to the Middle Eastern countries and even to neighboring Iran, it would be a win-win situation, and that is something which we would welcome, and we hope and we expect that in the long run, these avenues, they are explored, because otherwise, if we, for example, even if we look at India, when Pakistan and India, when their bilateral trade, it stops. So, most of the trade, most of the goods which don't have a substitute, they trade those goods through UAE. Hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars of trade is diverted from India to Pakistan via the UAE and vice versa. So with India, of course, we have greater security issues. With Afghanistan, we don't have as big issues, but there are still issues. So once they are solved, the people, mobility of people, mobility of labor, mobility of capital, and mobility of goodwill, it should be promoted. It should be promoted.
Thank you, Dr. Kashif Saeed, for your today sitting in the program, Development Talk at the premises of Department of Economics at University of Peshawar. Dear viewers, you have just watched and view what Dr. Kashif Saeed has to say about the Afghan refugee repatriation to Afghanistan. You see and that from the past 4.5 decades, Pakistan has amicably and amiably has, provided Afghan every economic opportunity in Pakistan to live with dignity and pride in a host nation like Pakistan. We still feel and we will pray for Afghanistan prosperity in coming times ahead. Goodbye from the podcast studio. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.